The bench was cold. Lucy didn't move. She sat perfectly still, bare feet pressed against the concrete, a worn Bible clutched to her chest like it was the only warm thing left in the world. Around her, Magnolia Square hummed with the noise of people who had somewhere to be, cars, laughter, the smell of street food drifting from a cart nearby. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked. She was 7 years old and she had been sitting there for 3 hours. Then the black car pulled up. It didn't just park. It arrived. The kind of arrival that makes people glance over their shoulders without knowing why. A chauffeur stepped out first, opened the rear door, and Dominic Hale stepped onto the pavement, like a man who had never once doubted his right to take up space. 6'2", gray suit, ice in his eyes. He was on his phone before his feet hit the ground. Cancel the Singapore call, move it to Thursday, and tell Marcus if he misses another deadline, he's done. He didn't wait for a response. He never did. His driver pointed toward the park. Your 7 o'clock is just through there, sir. Dominic didn't acknowledge him. He was already walking. That was when he saw her. He almost didn't stop. In fact, he kept walking for 2 full steps before something, not compassion, not instinct, something he couldn't name, made him slow down. A little girl, alone, barefoot, Bible pressed to her chest, eyes fixed on the ground. He stopped. She looked up. Her eyes were brown and completely calm. Not the calm of a child who didn't understand her situation. The calm of a child who had made peace with it. Sir, she said softly, do you know where people go when they have nowhere left? Dominic stared at her. He had been asked thousands of questions in his life. Boardroom questions, legal questions, loaded questions from people who wanted his money or his influence or both. But no one had ever asked him anything like that. Not like that. Not with those eyes. He looked around. Nobody else was paying attention. The street cart vendor had his back turned. A couple walked past, deep in their own world. It was just him and this child. Where are your parents? He asked. My mama's sick, she said simply. She's in the hospital. I've been waiting for someone to help us. She paused. I've been praying someone would come. Something moved through Dominic Hale's chest. He ignored it. He was very good at ignoring things. How long have you been sitting here? Since this morning. He checked his watch. It was 6:58 p.m. The phone in his hand buzzed. Marcus calling back. Dominic looked at the screen. Then he looked at Lucy. He pressed decline. What's your name? Lucy, she said. Lucy Whitmore. He crouched down, slowly, stiffly, like a man who hadn't crouched in years, and looked at her at eye level. Up close, he could see the dust on her dress, a small fabric purse on the bench beside her. The Bible's cover was cracked and soft from years of handling. Where did you sleep last night, Lucy? She looked at him steadily. I didn't. He stood up, pushed his phone into his pocket, looked away from her, jaw tight, processing something he didn't want to process. This wasn't his problem. He had a meeting in 4 minutes. One he had a company to run and a city that moved according to his decisions and a life that had been built, carefully, deliberately, to never include moments like this one. But here was the thing about Dominic Hale that very few people knew, because he had buried it so deep he barely knew it himself. Once, a long time ago, he had walked away from someone who needed him, and he had told himself it was the right thing to do. He had told himself that so many times that he almost believed it. He looked down at Lucy again. She wasn't crying. She wasn't performing. She was just sitting there holding her Bible, waiting, like she knew somehow that this was exactly how it was supposed to go. Come on, he said quietly. Let's get you something to eat. She stood up immediately, tucked the Bible under her arm, and picked up her small purse. No hesitation. Total trust. That trust unsettled him more than anything else about her. As they walked toward the food cart, Dominic's phone buzzed again, then again. He didn't check it. He was watching Lucy out of the corner of his eye. The way she walked, straight-backed, small, barefoot on the pavement, without flinching. Does it hurt? He asked, nodding toward her feet. A little, and she said, but I've been asking God to make it stop hurting. And mostly it does. Dominic said nothing. She glanced up at him. Do you believe in God? He didn't answer. She nodded slowly, like his silence was an answer she'd expected and already forgiven. That's okay. He believes in you. Dominic Hale, a man who had reduced grown men to silence in negotiations, who had walked out of courtrooms without flinching, sure who had been called ruthless in 3 different languages, felt something crack open in the center of his chest. He ordered her a hot meal. She ate every bite, and while she ate, he stood there watching her, and for the first time in a very long time, Dominic Hale had absolutely no idea what to do next. If this story is already getting to you, you're not alone. Hit that like button and subscribe. There's so much more to come. Dominic didn't take her to a restaurant. He should have. Instead, he stood at that food cart for 20 minutes while Lucy finished her meal, and then finished the bottled water he bought her, and then sat quietly with her hands folded on her lap, like she was waiting for a church service to begin. He kept telling himself he was going to leave. He didn't leave. "You said your mother is in the hospital," he said finally. "Which one?" "Mercy General," Lucy said. "She's been there 4 days. The doctor said she needs an operation, but there's no money." She said it plainly, the way children say terrible things, without armor, without apology. "I've been going back every day, but they won't let me stay past visiting hours, so I come here." "Why here?" She looked around the square thoughtfully. "Mama used to bring me here when I was little. And she said it was the kind of place where good things happen if you wait long enough." A small pause. "I've been waiting." Dominic looked at her. Something behind his eyes shifted. He looked away before it could show. "Where's your father?" Lucy was quiet for a moment. "He left before I was old enough to remember him. Mama doesn't talk about him much. She just says God has a plan." She tilted her head slightly. "Do you think that's true? That God has a plan?" "I think people use that to explain things they can't control." Lucy considered this with the seriousness of a much older person. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it just means someone's coming who doesn't know they're supposed to yet." He looked at her sharply. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching a pigeon peck at the ground near her bare feet, nor her Bible resting across her knees, completely unbothered by the fact that she was 7 years old and alone and had nowhere to sleep. While Lucy sat, Dominic's mind was doing what it always did, calculating, sorting, looking for the fastest, cleanest exit from a situation that didn't concern him. He ran a billion-dollar infrastructure firm. He had contracts in 4 countries, a board meeting Thursday, and a keynote in Dubai next week. He did not have time for this. He did not have the emotional architecture for this. And yet, he found himself studying her face, the quiet dignity in it, the way she carried her situation without collapsing under it. He had been in rooms full of powerful people who couldn't manage that. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. "Vanessa." He sent it to voicemail. "Is there anyone looking after you?" he asked. "A neighbor? A family friend?" "Mrs. Dalton checks on me sometimes," Lucy said. "She lives next door to where we used to live, before we got evicted." She said the word evicted with no drama, just fact. "She's old and she can't walk very well, but she's kind. She gave me a sandwich yesterday." "Where did you sleep last night?" Lucy hesitated for the first time, just briefly. "In the hallway of our old building. The lock on the side door is broken. It was dry." The words landed on Dominic like something physical. He said nothing for a long moment. He straightened his cufflink, then straightened it again. A habit he had when he was holding something at a distance. "And the night before?" "The hospital waiting room, but they asked me to leave in the morning." He stood up abruptly, took 2 steps away from her, turned his back. Etienne looked out across the square. His jaw was tight. His shoulders were rigid. From behind, he looked like a man who was angry. He wasn't angry. He was something else entirely, something he didn't have a clean word for, something that lived in the part of him he had sealed off years ago and never revisited. A little girl with no shoes and a cracked Bible had blown the door clean off. He turned back around. "Tell me about your mother. What's her name?" Lucy's face changed when he asked that. Something warm and proud moved through it. "Grace," she said. "Grace Whitmore. She's the most beautiful person I know. She sings when she cooks, and she always smells like lavender, and she reads to me every night, even when she's tired." Her voice stayed steady, but her hands tightened slightly on the Bible. "She's going to be okay. I know she is. I've been praying every day." "How long has she been sick?" She started getting bad about 3 weeks ago. She kept saying it was nothing, just tired. But then one morning she couldn't get up, and I called for help, and they took her away and... Lucy stopped, drew a slow breath. I haven't seen her smile since. Dominic looked at this child, this small, faithful, entirely alone child, and felt the wall he had spent 15 years constructing develop a crack it was not going to recover from. Finish your water, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Lucy picked up the bottle, took a sip, looked up at him with those steady brown eyes. Are you going to help us? He should have said he didn't know. He should have said he'd make a call, point her toward a shelter. I'd hand her a business card for someone whose job it was to handle situations like this. That's what the old Dominic, the efficient one, the protected one, would have done. Instead, he heard himself say, yes. Lucy nodded slowly, like she'd known all along, like she'd been sitting on that bench waiting specifically for him and had never once doubted he would come. That terrified him more than anything had in years. This story is just getting started. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And if someone came to mind while watching this, share it with them. Mrs. Dalton lived on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like boiled cabbage and old carpet. She answered the door in a housecoat, squinting through thick glasses, one hand gripping a walking frame. When she saw Lucy, her face collapsed with relief. Child, where have you been? I've been calling the hospital. I've been asking the super... She stopped when she saw Dominic standing behind Lucy in the hallway. Her eyes moved up and down him slowly. The suit, the watch, the expression that didn't quite fit a man standing in a corridor like this one. Who's this? His name is Mr. Hale, Lucy said. He's helping us. Mrs. Dalton studied him for a long moment with the unfiltered suspicion of a woman who had lived long enough to distrust good timing. Helping how? We're going to the hospital, Dominic said. Oh, I need to know everything you know about Grace Whitmore's condition. Mrs. Dalton looked at Lucy. Lucy gave a small nod. Something in that exchange, the trust between them, the shorthand of it, made Dominic's chest tighten. This child had been navigating this alone, and the only adult in her corner was a woman who could barely walk. Mrs. Dalton let them in. She lowered herself into an armchair and folded her hands. Grace has been at Mercy General 4 days now. Some kind of infection that went to her blood. Sepsis, they called it. She needs surgery and a course of treatment that costs more than that woman has seen in 5 years. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. I called social services twice. They said someone would follow up. Nobody came. Dominic said nothing. His expression didn't change. But his hand moved to his phone. The hospital, he said. Have they refused treatment? They haven't refused. They've just slowed everything down. The way they do when there's no insurance and no money and nobody with a last name that means anything. Mrs. Dalton looked at him levelly. You look like a man with a last name that means something. I am, he said. She held his gaze. Then don't waste it. Dominic turned to Lucy, who was standing in the middle of the small living room holding her Bible with both hands, watching him carefully. Get your things, he said. Whatever you need for tonight. We're going now. Lucy moved immediately. She disappeared into a back room and came back in under a minute, the same small purse over her shoulder, the same Bible under her arm. Knew she had added one thing. A folded photograph tucked carefully into the Bible's front cover. Dominic caught a glimpse of it. A woman, laughing, sunlight. He looked away. Mrs. Dalton reached out and caught Lucy's hand as she passed. You tell your mama that Evelyn Dalton has been praying without stopping. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Lucy squeezed her hand and held it for a moment, and in that gesture, Dominic saw something that nearly undid him. A 7-year-old comforting an old woman, steady as a stone, giving strength she had every right to keep for herself. They rode to Mercy General in silence. Lucy sat in the back seat of Dominic's car, upright, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. His driver kept glancing in the rearview mirror with a look Dominic chose not to acknowledge. Oh, the city moved past the windows. Lit up, indifferent, beautiful in the way cities are when you're watching them from inside a pain you can't explain. What was she like? Dominic asked. Before she got sick. Lucy answered without hesitation. Strong. She worked double shifts at the laundry and still made dinner every night. Real dinner, not just sandwiches. She used to say that a hot meal was the best way to tell someone they mattered. A small pause. She sang in the choir at church. She had the kind of voice that made people stop talking. Dominic looked out the window. She sounds remarkable. She is remarkable, Lucy said, with gentle but absolute firmness. Present tense, non-negotiable. He nodded slowly. They arrived at Mercy General at 8:30, and the lobby was the particular kind of exhausting that hospitals always are. Fluorescent light, stale air, the ambient sound of people waiting for news they weren't sure they wanted. A nurse at the front desk looked up when they walked in, clocked Lucy, and her expression tightened with recognition. Visiting hours ended at 8, she said. I'm not here for visiting hours, Dominic said. He placed a card on the desk. I need to speak with whoever is overseeing Grace Whitmore's care. Now. The nurse looked at the card. Something in her posture changed. Not dramatically, just a fraction. The particular fraction that happens when a name registers. I'll page Dr. Osei, she said. Lucy stood beside Dominic at the desk, not pulling at his sleeve, not fidgeting, just present, waiting. He glanced down at her once and found her looking straight ahead, lips moving slightly, almost imperceptibly. Praying, he realized. She was praying, right there in the lobby, in the middle of all that noise and fluorescent light. With the quiet focus of someone who had been doing it so long, it had become as natural as breathing. He had not prayed since he was 9 years old. He had decided at 9 that prayer was something people did when they had run out of options. He had spent the next 30 years making sure he never ran out of options. Looking at Lucy, he wasn't sure that had been the victory he'd thought it was. Dr. Osei arrived in 7 minutes. Tall, tired around the eyes, carrying a tablet. He shook Dominic's hand and led them to a consultation room off the main corridor, where he pulled up Grace's file without being asked. Ms. Whitmore has sepsis originating from an untreated abdominal infection, he said. She needs emergency surgery and a minimum of 2 weeks of IV treatment following. Without intervention in the next 24 to 48 hours, he stopped, glanced at Lucy, adjusted. Time is a significant factor. What's the total cost? Dominic asked. Dr. Osei told him. Dominic didn't blink. Schedule the surgery for tomorrow morning. Everything. Surgery, treatment, recovery, private room, goes on this account. He handed over a second card. Tonight. Dr. Osei looked at the card, looked at Dominic. Sir, this is very generous. It's not generous, Dominic said. It's necessary. Is there anything else you need from me? No. We'll get the paperwork started immediately. Good. The doctor left. Dominic turned around and found Lucy standing in the middle of the consultation room. Bible pressed to her chest, eyes shining, not crying, just full. So full that the feeling was coming through her skin. Thank you, she whispered. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Something in his throat moved. Don't thank me yet, he said quietly. Let's make sure she's okay first. Lucy nodded. Then, with the complete and disarming certainty of a child who had never once been taught to doubt, she said, She will be. God already knew you were coming. Dominic had no answer for that. He stood there in the consultation room of Mercy General Hospital, a billion-dollar company in his name, an entire city that bent to his decisions, and this small girl had just said something that made all of it feel like furniture. Present, but not the point. He cleared his throat, looked at the door. They'll let you see her now, he said, for a few minutes. Lucy walked toward the door. Then she stopped and looked back at him. Are you coming? He hesitated, 1 full second. Yes, he said, and he followed her down the hall. If this story is moving you, hit subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell us what you're feeling right now. We read every single one. Grace Whitmore was smaller than Dominic expected. The woman in the bed was thin in the way illness makes people thin, like something essential had been slowly withdrawn. Tubes ran from her arm to a drip stand. But even like this, there was something undefeated about her face. Lucy walked to the bed and took her mother's hand with both of hers. She pressed it against her cheek and closed her eyes without making a sound. Dominic stood in the doorway. He told himself he was giving them privacy. That was partly true. The other part was that he couldn't move. Grace's eyes opened, unfocused at first. Then she found Lucy's face and something came back into her. Color, presence, a sharpening that was almost painful to witness. "Baby," she whispered. "I'm here. Aunt Mama. Have you been eating?" "Yes." "Don't lie to your mother. I had a hot meal tonight, a real one." Grace's eyes drifted past Lucy and found Dominic. She assessed him the way a woman does when she's never had the luxury of reading situations slowly. "Who's this?" "His name is Mr. Hale," Lucy said. "He helped us." "How much did it cost him?" Dominic stepped in. "That's not your concern right now. Anything that concerns my daughter concerns me." "Your surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning," he said. "Everything is taken care of." "I don't take charity," Grace said quietly. "Neither do I. We'll figure out the rest later." Whatever she saw in his face seemed to settle something. She turned back to Lucy, pulled her close, and pressed a long kiss to her forehead. "My brave, faithful girl," she murmured. Lucy held on and didn't let go. Dominic looked at the wall. When the night nurse came, Lucy kissed her mother's hand and stood carefully. Grace's fingers held hers one extra moment before releasing. In the corridor, Dominic's phone rang. "Vanessa." "Where are you?" Her voice was smooth even. "You missed dinner. The Hartley call. Marcus is losing his mind." "Something came up." "You're running a company, Dominic, not a charity schedule." He glanced at Lucy walking ahead, trailing her fingers along the wall. "I'll explain tomorrow. I need you at the office by 7. The Singapore deal." "I said tomorrow, Vanessa." He ended the call. Lucy was watching him. "Is she your girlfriend?" "That's not your concern." "She sounds unhappy." "She's always unhappy." "Then why are you still with her?" He looked at her. 7-year-olds don't ask questions like that." "I'm asking it," she said simply. He almost smiled. "Come on." He put her in the Meridian Hotel 3 blocks from the hospital. A junior suite, still probably larger than anywhere she'd slept in months. Lucy sat on the enormous bed, legs dangling, taking in the room quietly, without the grabbing excitement most children would show. "You should sleep," Dominic said from the doorway. "I will." "Then, are you coming back tomorrow?" "I'll be here before your mother goes into surgery." "Promise?" The word landed harder than he expected. His world ran on contracts and agreements, not promises. "Yes," he said. "I promise." She lay back, pulled the covers up, and folded her hands over the blanket exactly as she had on the park bench. Same posture, same peace. "Good night, Mr. Hale." "Good night." With Lucy. He stood in the corridor a moment, hands still on the door handle. Then he took out his phone and opened a message to his PA. "Clear tomorrow's calendar. All of it." He sent it before he could reconsider. He was back by 6:15 the next morning. When they wheeled Grace toward surgery, Lucy stood beside Dominic and took his hand without asking permission. He let her. Grace reached from the gurney, took Lucy's free hand, and looked at her daughter with a love so concentrated it was almost hard to witness directly. "I'll be right here when you wake up," Lucy said. Grace looked up at Dominic. Something passed between them, wordless, unresolved. Then the doors swung shut. They were halfway to the waiting area when the main entrance opened and Vanessa Cole walked in. Coat, heels, leather portfolio. She found Dominic and moved toward him with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this. "We need to talk." "Not now." "Now." She opened the portfolio. "I've been speaking to the board. Missed calls, canceled meetings, unilateral financial decisions. There are people concerned about your judgment." She produced a set of documents. "Preliminary proceedings, sign voluntarily, take 30 days. You're trying to have me declared unfit. I'm trying to protect the company. You're trying to take it." He looked at her fully for the first time in a long time. "How long have you been planning this?" She didn't answer. Lucy stood quietly at his side, watching Vanessa with clear, steady eyes. Vanessa noticed her, looked down with an expression that took a moment to arrange itself. "Who is this?" "Her name is Lucy," Dominic said. "Incarnate, and she has more integrity in that Bible she's carrying than everything in that portfolio combined." Vanessa stared at him. "You've lost your mind." "I've found it." He took the documents from her hand and passed them to his driver. "Don't come to this hospital again." He placed a hand gently on Lucy's back and guided her toward the waiting area without looking back. "Don't go anywhere. The most powerful moment in this story is still coming. Subscribe now and hit the bell so you don't miss it." The waiting room at Mercy General was the kind of place that stripped everything back. No status, no leverage, no amount of money or influence changed the fact that you were sitting in a plastic chair, waiting for news that would either break you or spare you. Dominic had not sat in a waiting room in 20 years. He had forgotten what it felt like to have no control over an outcome. Lucy sat beside him with her Bible open on her lap, not reading exactly, just resting her hands on the pages. Like the contact itself meant something. An hour passed, then another. Dominic got up twice to get coffee he didn't drink. He checked his phone out of habit and put it away without reading anything. A man across the room was crying quietly into his hands. A woman near the window had fallen asleep sitting up, her head tilted against the glass. The whole room had the feeling of people holding their breath in shifts. "Are you scared?" Lucy asked without looking up. He sat back down. "I don't get scared." She turned to Paige. "Everyone gets scared. They just call it different things." He looked at her. "What do you call it?" "Waiting without being sure," she said simply. "That's all fear really is." He was quiet for a moment. "And you're not afraid right now?" She considered this honestly. "I am," she said. "But being afraid and trusting God at the same time is okay. Mama taught me that. She said faith isn't the absence of fear. It's just fear that's decided to keep moving anyway." Dominic said nothing. He turned that over in his mind the way you turn something unfamiliar in your hands, checking its weight and edges. Another hour passed. At 10:30, Lucy closed her Bible, slid off her chair, and knelt on the waiting room floor. Right there, between the plastic chairs and the scuffed linoleum and the hum of the vending machine in the corner. She folded her hands, bowed her head, and began to pray. People noticed. A few glanced over, then away, giving her the particular privacy that unself-conscious faith demands. Dominic watched her. He didn't look away. He couldn't. Her lips moved quietly. He couldn't hear the words. He didn't need to. Whatever she was saying, it was being said with her whole self. Not performed, not desperate, just steady and certain, and deeply, completely sincere. Something happened to Dominic in that moment that he would not have been able to explain to anyone. It wasn't dramatic. There was no lightning, no sudden flood of feeling. It was quieter than that. Like a room he had kept locked for a very long time had its window open an inch, and the air that came through was so clean and so different from everything else inside him that it hurt. He had walked away from things. That was the truth of him. When situations got complicated, when emotions required more from him than he knew how to give, he had walked away. From relationships, from responsibilities. From a woman named Grace 8 years ago, before he knew what he was walking away from. He had told himself it was pragmatism, efficiency. He was not the kind of man built for the kind of life she was asking for. Looking at Lucy kneeling on that floor, he understood for the first time what his walking away had actually built. Not freedom, not efficiency. Just this. A little girl, alone on a bench with no shoes, waiting for someone who should have been there all along. Lucy finished praying. She climbed back into her chair, smoothed her dress, reopened her Bible. She glanced at Dominic and found him staring at her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She studied him for a moment. "You look like you're thinking about something sad." "I'm thinking about something I should have done differently." She nodded, unsurprised. "Mama says it's never too late to do the right thing. She says that's what grace means. Not just her name, the real thing, that it's always available. You just have to want it." Dominic looked at the floor. "Mr. Hale," Lucy said. "Yes. I prayed for you too, just now." He looked up. "You prayed for me?" "I asked God to give you back whatever you lost." She said it without drama, without expectation of a particular response. The way she said everything, like it was simply true and she was simply reporting it. "I think you lost something important a long time ago. I could tell when I first saw you. You had this look. She paused, searching for the word. Empty, like a house with all the lights off. He stared at her. I think you're finding it again, though, she added. The lights are coming back on. She looked down at her Bible. I can see it. Dominic Hale, who had negotiated with governments, who had been called the coldest man in any room he entered, who had not cried since the age of 9, felt his eyes burn. He looked away fast, jaw tight, controlled the thing before it could become anything. But it had been there, and Lucy had seen it, and she didn't say anything more about it because she didn't need to. She just sat beside him, Bible open, steady as a stone, letting him have the moment without making him explain it. That was when Dr. Osei appeared in the doorway. Both of them stood. The surgery went well, he said. She's in recovery. She's asking for her daughter. Lucy's hand found Dominic's. She held it tight. He held it back. If this story is touching something in you, leave a comment right now. Tell us who you're watching this for, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Grace was awake when they walked in, pale, diminished, but awake. Her eyes found Lucy first, and the relief in them was physical, like a knot releasing. Lucy crossed the room in 3 steps and buried her face against her mother's shoulder, and Grace wrapped her arm around her and held her with a fierceness that had no regard for the tubes or the monitors or the pain it clearly cost her. Dominic stood back. He was getting good at standing back in doorways. It was the only place he felt he had any right to be in scenes like this one. Grace looked at him over Lucy's head. Dr. Osei told me what you did, she said. Her voice was still rough, but stronger than the night before. The surgery, the private room, all of it. Don't mention it. I have to mention it. A pause. Why did you do it? Yeah, you don't know us. He didn't have a clean answer for that. Lucy asked for help, he said. It seemed wrong not to. Grace studied him, that same careful, unhurried assessment. People walk past children asking for help every day, she said. You didn't. I want to know why. The room was very quiet. Lucy had pulled back slightly and was looking between them with an expression that was hard to read. Watchful, serious, older than her years. I don't know, Dominic said. It was the most honest thing he had said in years. Grace kept looking at him. Something was moving behind her eyes now. Not suspicion anymore. Something more complicated, more unsettled. She scanned his face slowly, feature by feature. The way you look at something you think you recognize but can't quite place. What did you say your name was? She asked quietly. Dominic Hale. The monitor beside her bed beeped steadily. Outside in the corridor, a trolley rolled past. Somewhere down the ward, a phone rang twice and stopped. Grace had gone very still. Grace, he said. Her eyes were wet. She wasn't blinking. She was staring at him like she was watching something she had given up expecting. A long time ago walk through a door it had no business walking through. Dominic, she said. Not a greeting, just the word, like she was confirming something to herself. He went very still. Lucy looked at her mother. Mama, what's wrong? Grace didn't answer immediately. She reached out and took Lucy's hand and pressed it between both of hers. Her eyes stayed on Dominic. How old are you? She asked Lucy, though she clearly already knew. 7, Lucy said, confused. Mama, you know how old I am. 7, Grace repeated softly. Her eyes didn't leave Dominic's face. The number landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Dominic's mind moved backward with a precision that felt almost mechanical. Dates, timelines, a conversation he had replayed more times than he would ever admit. In the back of cars, in the silence of hotel rooms, and in the particular darkness of 3 in the morning when the things you've buried decide to surface. A woman named Grace, 8 years ago. A decision he had told himself was mutual. A door he had closed and walked away from, and never looked back at, because looking back would have required something he wasn't able to give. He looked at Lucy, really looked. The way he hadn't let himself look since the park. The set of her eyes, the line of her jaw. Something in the way she held herself. That particular stillness, that quiet authority that he had assumed came from circumstance and faith. He had it too. He had always had it. He had just never seen it reflected back at him from a face that small. Grace, he said. His voice came out stripped of everything. She nodded, one small nod. Her eyes were streaming now, silently, without any change in her expression. Why didn't you? He stopped, restarted. I didn't know. I tried to tell you, she said quietly. Twice. You didn't take my calls. The words were not an accusation. That was almost worse. They were just the truth, laid down gently, the way you lay something fragile on a surface and step back. He had not taken her calls. He remembered. He had seen her name, and he had let it ring, and he had told himself it was better this way. Was cleaner, that she would be fine, that they would both be fine, that some decisions were hard but still correct. He had been wrong. He had been catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. Lucy was looking between them now with an expression that had moved past confusion into something more careful. Mama, she said slowly, do you know Mr. Hale? Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at her daughter. This brave, extraordinary child who had sat on a park bench for 10 hours asking strangers for help with the same calm certainty she brought to everything, who had prayed without ceasing, who had told a cold and empty man that God believed in him. And she took a long breath. Lucy, she said gently, do you remember what you asked God for every night before bed? Lucy's forehead creased. She asked him to bring my daddy home. The word struck Dominic in the chest like something blunt and heavy. Grace looked at him. Lucy looked at him. The monitor beeped. The corridor hummed. The world outside the window moved at its usual indifferent pace. Dominic's legs found the chair beside the bed. He sat down heavily, put his elbows on his knees and pressed his hands over his face, and stayed like that for a long time. When he took his hands away, his eyes were red. He didn't try to hide it. I didn't know, he said again, barely a sound. I know, Grace said. That doesn't make it. He stopped. There was no sentence that finished cleanly. I left and I didn't look back, and the whole time she was here, Grace said softly. Lucy had not moved. She was sitting on the edge of her mother's bed, Bible in her lap, when watching Dominic with those steady brown eyes. Not angry, not frightened, processing the way she processed everything, carefully, faithfully, with a depth that had no business existing in a 7-year-old. Are you my daddy? She asked. The question was simple, quiet. It had the weight of the world in it. Dominic looked at her. His jaw worked. He nodded once. Lucy looked down at her Bible, then back up at him. I prayed for you every night, she said, even when I didn't know your name. I just asked God to send you. She paused. He did. Dominic made a sound that wasn't quite a word. He reached out, slowly, uncertain, a man who had never once felt uncertain about anything, and took her small hand in his. She let him hold it. Grace watched them both. When the tears were still coming, but her face had changed. The lines of exhaustion and fear had shifted into something that looked impossibly like relief. I'm sorry, Dominic said, to both of them, to the room. I know, Grace said again. Lucy squeezed his hand. You're here now, she said firmly. Like that settled it. Like that was enough to build on. That's what matters. Dominic looked at this child, his child, and everything he had built and protected and armored himself with for 15 years felt, in that moment, like exactly what it was. A substitute. A replacement for the thing he had walked away from, without knowing what he was walking away from. He hadn't just left Grace. He had left his own daughter before she was even born. The guilt of that was going to take a long time. He understood that. There was no transaction that settled it, no decision that fixed it cleanly. It was the kind of thing you carried and worked and earned your way through, slowly, day by day. But Lucy was still holding his hand, and that was somewhere to start. We're almost at the end, and it's worth every second. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and drop a comment below. 2 weeks later, Grace Whitmore walked out of Mercy General on her own 2 feet. She moved slowly, one hand on Lucy's shoulder, the other holding the rail of the exit ramp. The afternoon light hit her full in the face, and she stopped for a moment and just stood in it, eyes closed, breathing it in. Like she was relearning what ordinary felt like. Like ordinary was the most extraordinary thing she had ever tasted. Lucy stood beside her, beaming. Dominic stood a few feet back, giving them the moment. He was getting better at that, at knowing which moments belonged to them and which ones he had the right to step into. It was a new skill, one of many he was acquiring. He had spent the 2 weeks doing what he should have done 8 years ago. Not with money, though he had made sure Grace's recovery had everything it needed. With time, and with presence, with showing up every single day, even when he didn't know what to say or how to say it. He sat beside Grace's bed in the evenings after Lucy fell asleep in the chair. They talked sometimes. Other times they just sat and let the silence carry what words couldn't yet reach. It was not simple. It was not resolved. There was history between them that would take longer than 2 weeks to navigate. Hurt and absence and years of a life he had not been part of. Grace was not a woman who simplified things she didn't feel, and he respected that. He was learning to sit inside complicated feelings without reaching for the exit. That was new for him, too. But Lucy was a different story entirely. She had accepted him with a completeness that undid him every single time he thought about it. No conditions, no period of assessment. He was her father and she had prayed for him, and God had sent him, and that, for Lucy, was the entire framework. She slotted him into her world with the same calm certainty she brought to everything. Matter of fact, unhurried, absolute. She had started saving him things. A drawing she made during one of Grace's treatment sessions. A smooth stone she found in the hospital garden because she thought he looked like he needed something to hold. She brought him sections of her Bible, different ones each visit, and read them to him in the chair beside her mother's bed in her small, serious voice, while he sat and listened and did not once check his phone. He had not checked his phone during any of it. His company had not collapsed. The board had been managed. When Vanessa was gone, she had withdrawn quietly once his legal team made clear the extent of what she had attempted. The Singapore deal had closed without him in the room. The world, it turned out, kept moving even when Dominic Hale was not directing it. He was still adjusting to that discovery. Now Grace reached the bottom of the ramp and the three of them stood together on the pavement outside Mercy General. Lucy looked up at Dominic. "So what happens now?" she asked. He looked at Grace. She looked back at him, steady, careful, giving him nothing he hadn't earned. "Now we take it one day at a time," he said. Lucy considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "One day at a time is okay," she decided. "That's how prayer works too. You don't pray for the whole year at once, just today." Grace made a soft sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. It was the closest thing to a laugh Dominic had heard from her yet, and it moved through him like the first warm day after a long winter. He reached into his jacket and produced a small key. He held it out toward Grace. She looked at it without touching it. "It's not a gift," he said quickly. "It's not charity. It's—" he searched for the right word. "It's a start. There's a house, 3 blocks from Lucy's school. It's furnished. It's yours for as long as you need it. No conditions, no obligations. Just somewhere safe while we figure the rest out." Grace looked at the key for a long moment, then at him. "One day at a time," she said quietly. "One day at a time," he agreed. She took the key. Lucy immediately took both their hands, one each, without ceremony, without announcement, and looked up at them with an expression of such complete and uncomplicated satisfaction that Dominic had to look away for a moment to recover himself. They walked to the car together, Lucy in the middle, Dominic on one side, Grace on the other. It was not a perfect picture. There was too much history and too much distance, and too much that still needed to be said and worked through and repaired for it to be that. But it was real, and it was begun, and it had started with a little girl on a cold park bench with no shoes and a worn Bible, and enough faith for all three of them. She had asked God to send someone. She had sat in that square, and she had waited steady and certain while the city moved around her and nobody stopped and the hours passed. And she had not doubted, not once. And eventually, a black car had pulled up, and a man who thought he had everything had stepped out, and a child who had nothing had looked up at him with quiet brown eyes and asked him the only question that had ever truly mattered. And something in him, buried, locked away, half forgotten but never quite gone, had recognized her before his mind caught up. Because that is what grace does. The real kind. Not the absence of the mess or the pain or the years of wrong turns. Just the door that stays open anyway. Just the light that comes back on. Just a little girl who prays every night for a father she has never met, certain down to her bones that he is coming. He was just taking the long way home. This is where the journey ends. But if it moved you, don't let it stop here. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. I'll leave a comment telling us what this meant to you. Subscribe if you haven't already. There are more stories like this one coming. Stories about faith, about second chances, about what happens when we stop running from the things that matter most. We'll see you in the next one.